Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about Tales of the Jedi. So, just so you guys know, this is a pseudo anthology. It's not. It's kind of. It's stories that are taking place from the lives of two specific characters. So it's kind of moments from these two characters. And there's not a real order that you have to watch them, but there is an order of time that they are presented in when you watch them. Either way, we are going to be going into spoiler territory for the entire show. There's only 6 episodes. Each of those episodes are at most like 15 minutes or less. So they're really easy to get through in one sitting. It won't take you that long. But just so you guys know, if you don't want to be spoiled, this is a good time to click away, go and check it out on Disney Plus, and then come back and see what we have to say about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right into this. So, we all know how much we love Star Wars. I am somebody who has watched all of the animated media up until this point. I know, Cheryl, you're working your way through the Clone Wars right now, but you've also watched all the live action media there is on offer up until this point as well. So there's a lot of Star Wars lore that both you and I are familiar with, and if there's things that you might not be familiar with, I can like remind you or like bring it up to your attention, and vice versa. So going into this, I knew that the two stories that we were going to be following were going to be of Count Dooku and Ahsoka Tano. And I was very excited because the Clone Wars did a lot of good things for characters. The Clone Wars did a lot for Anakin Skywalker, rounding out that character and making him an even better character. It did a lot for his relationship with Obi-Wan Kenobi. It also did a lot for Count Dooku as a villain. It establishes Count Dooku as a real force to be reckoned with. And it's a shame because when you see the movies, you only see Count Dooku at the end of the second movie and the beginning of the third. But the Clone Wars series really established him as a strong force that is very, very hard for our heroes to defeat, who is conniving, who is smart, but also supremely skilled time and time again. And my second favorite character outside of Anakin Skywalker is Ahsoka Tano, who was created for the Clone Wars series and who has now broken out of that animated series and now is gracing our live action television screens. So seeing a storyline that was going to cover both of their past, primarily Dooku's past, a little bit of Ahsoka's past, and some of her present, future past, depending on when you're looking at it in the timeline, um, was very exciting for me. So before I start talking about like the individual things that happen in this episode that like get me really hyped, I just want to like kick it to you to ask you if you, because I know you don't watch trailers, so I was wondering what did you know anything about this going in?
I had no idea. I thought it was going to be like Visions. I had low expectations. And then when I first started watching it, I was like, oh, it's about, the Ahsoka's race. And I didn't know that Ahsoka was going to be in it. I didn't think that it was going to be related to any of the characters that we know at all. So when I found out that the baby was Ahsoka, I was all excited. I was like, okay, so these are going to be about characters that we know. Um, and just overall watching it, I was very happy to to find these episodes being placed within the timeline at different points of the story that has already been established and having them actually fit like an insert into stuff that already exists. Like, and I applaud that. Like, bravo that they did it. They did it in a seamless way that didn't make me question, like, wait, that doesn't fit in with, like, continuity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it worked, and it's exciting because I love stuff like that. It's not just a Star Wars thing, but I love seeing the other side, like the other point of view from something that we've already seen before, something that already exists, or even just like something like the other guys where it's about people that you don't usually get to see the story of. So yeah, I'm not going to get into the specifics just quite yet, but just overall, I had a good time and I was really happy with what they came out with. Is it my favorite Star Wars content? I would say no. because it was so short and I would have loved to have more. And when you have like little insert stories like this, it's hard to feel like it's the most amazing thing you've ever watched because they're so short and they just can't by nature be more significant than the stories that it's inserted around.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of that, I feel like it can't be like one of the greatest Star Wars things I've ever seen, but it's definitely at the top.
Yeah, so for me, like I actually do feel like it can go up there for some of the greatest Star Wars stuff, only because I'm not looking at it as its own like Tales of the Jedi type thing. I'm looking at it as a, hey, here's a prologue for the Clone Wars, or here's an epilogue for the Clone Wars, right? Like the Clone Wars series took place over 7 seasons, but those seasons weren't sequential. There was a time when Clone Wars got canceled and then had to come back and then got canceled again and then was gone for years and then came back with season 7, and now a couple of years later we're getting the Tales of the Jedi, which is still in the Clone Wars style and is actually still with the same voice actors from the Clone Wars and is still within that Clone Wars timeline, which is the prequel era. So like for me, I look at it less as its own thing and more like an extension of the Clone Wars.
It's
And so
bonus. It's
it's a
bonus
bonus.
material.
Exactly. So like I just kind of lump that together, and so for me it just enhances Clone Wars even more. Um and so like when it comes to, for instance, I'll start with Count Dooku since his is the first kind of full story that we get to see. We hear a lot about Count Dooku in the prequel movies. Well, maybe we don't hear that much, but we hear enough about him to just know that he was a Jedi that apprenticed under Master Yoda. And it's actually a surprise in the second movie where we find out that he is the one that's working with the Separatists. Because the other thing that we find out in those movies is that he was Qui-Gon Jinn's master. And he even has a moment in those movies where he's talking to Obi-Wan when he captures him, where he talks about how he misses Qui-Gon. And like how Qui-Gon was a good friend of his as well. And it's interesting because him and Obi-Wan share a connection through Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon is Obi-Wan's master, Qui-Gon is Dooku's apprentice. So going into this, as soon as that episode begins with a young Dooku coming out with a Padawan, I immediately knew it was Qui-Gon because I remembered that little bit of information. But I like the fact that this story adds more depth to Count Dooku, where we now get to see what drove him to be a separatist slash work for Sidious. And it's that whole idea that what is it, the road to something is paved with good intentions, but he had good intentions, and we know from the prequel era and from Clone Wars that the Jedi Council was flawed, and he wasn't the only one that saw this. This is actually what led to Anakin's downfall too. But it's interesting that even way back when, we could see those cracks showing, and you can see that Dooku sees those cracks, and within the context of the show, what Dooku sees, like I can't disagree with the opinions that he's making within the context of the show. And I think, and that's what I really like, is that it's really adding more depth to this villain that also gets more depth in the Clone Wars show itself.
It's funny how you were describing Qui-Gon because I did not remember that Dooku was Qui-Gon's master. But when I first saw young Qui-Gon, I was like, that looks like Liam Neeson. That must be Qui-Gon. But that's just a
Nice.
testament to the animation that they really
Yeah.
captured, Liam Neeson's look. And like, I don't know, they got the characters down so well. But that's also, like you mentioned, something that was done well with the Clone Wars show that kind of carried over to this. And I also, even though I haven't seen all of Clone Wars, immediately could recognize this. It's the same style of Clone Wars, but with more budget, I guess, or, upgraded technology because it
It's the
looks.
season 7 budget.
It looks a lot better. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and not that it didn't look good before, but it looked really, it felt like an upgrade. So, I mean, to be honest, I really wanted more episodes.
Or
So it's
yeah.
like I know I said that like this is not my favorite, but
Mm-hmm.
it's something separate.
Mm-hmm.
It's something to like appreciate, and the fact that I want more, I think says it all. Like it just wasn't enough. Like I can keep watching it for days.
Yes, I
But the
don't.
truth
I
is, there's
agree.
only 6 episodes
There's
that
only
I
six episodes, and they're all under 15 minutes.
yeah.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that. I did like even though I looked at it as a bonus, it just made me miss Clone Wars, and I realized I was like, I just want more Clone Wars, or I want to tell you the truth, I really think Star Wars for me might be at its peak in animation. Like I enjoy the stories that are being told. I enjoy the action sequences that they're able to do. A lot of these action sequences look way better than anything we've ever gotten in live action. Like some of the best lightsaber battles I can think of in recent memory have come from this show, and it's still handled with such respect and reverence for the world. Like it astounds me time and time again just how much is put into this show and this animation. Like yeah, you even get more alien diversity in animation due to the ease of execution. Like one of the biggest criticisms of Andor, despite being a great show, is the fact that there are like no aliens in that show because it's too much with the prosthetics and the puppetry and everything. So you can do it in a movie, fine, you have more budget, but to do it in a show, it's a lot more challenging. But in animation, you don't even have to think about it. It's easy to have a character like Ahsoka be your main character throughout the entirety of it. It's easy to have all these different Jedi that are of all these different alien races. But what gets me is just how much love is given to it. Like if you I'm gonna just take a minute to just talk about like the tone. Like we talked a little bit earlier with Guillermo del Toro stuff about how he's a master at establishing tone. The tone of this entire thing with Tales of the Jedi is dark. It is a dark tone. Even like some of the scenes we see are very it's like dimly lit scenes and very like some mood lighting, like very dark mood lighting. It's and the music captures that as well. There's really good scores in here. It's like I said, 6 episodes that are only 15 minutes apiece, but the music in these episodes is amazing. It captures so much of like this feeling of excitement, but also this feeling of dread. And the last thing I'm going to say before I kick it back to you is that like what gets me is just how much it is still it feels serious even though it is an animated show, so you would assume that it's mainly for kids. It does not shy away from adult themes. It does not shy away from death. It does not shy away from any of those things or even just like difficult concepts like the politics of like somebody you being a puppet or doing something that's taking away from someone else and then having a group of mercenaries want to like use that person as a puppet to like get the things that they want. Like even just the politics aren't necessarily kid kid friendly, and so it makes it so that people like us can easily jump in and enjoy it because it's not like that other thing we were going to talk about that was on Netflix. I don't even remember what it was called, which was clearly just for kids. Like it can be for kids and it can be for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because I feel like I don't think kids would really enjoy this because
Oh, you
I
don't
feel
think
like
so? Oh,
I think it would be too boring for kids because
maybe you're right.
they don't have the background or like they haven't watched every other Star Wars content to like really appreciate
Mm-hmm.
what we're seeing. So I mean, it's funny, like even the very first episode, which I would argue is probably
Least interesting.
the easy, but yet the easiest to like swallow because
Mm,
it's not like you're not worried because you know what happens to Ahsoka. You know, like she's gonna have this whole future, but we've never really seen Ahsoka as a baby.
right.
Um, but the thing that makes it kind of tragic even though she gets returned to the village, is that as soon as she gets back, she's gonna like how it ends is basically they're saying if you know the Star Wars lore, they're basically telling us like, oh well, yeah, she's been brought back, she's been returned, but now she's gonna go, like she's not gonna get to be here for very long, because she's a Jedi. Um, the thing that bothered me though about that first episode is that whole thing with the tiger. Well, first of all, I was kind of bummed that we were on this like different planet, but it looked just like Earth,
like
and
a saber-toothed
animals.
tiger.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
the animals were like Earth animals. But whatever. The fact that like there was this whole thing with a battle of between the Ahsoka's mom and the saber-toothed tiger, I was like, the tiger would go for the dead animal because it's easy free food. Except for like I guess maybe because the mom was defending the food. But I thought it was weird that it didn't just like eat Ahsoka, but it carried her away and like
Yeah, why
kept her
didn't it
as a
just kill
pet.
Ahsoka right there? Yeah, I thought about
Yeah,
that too.
and then like I'm just like, okay, Ahsoka's a baby, and she already can like stand up and like Jedi the saber tooth tiger, and I'm like, she's better than Luke. No one is supposed to be better than Luke. So that bothered me a little bit because it felt like a little inconsistent there, but whatever. That was not my favorite episode.
Yes,
Um,
I was gonna say that is not my favorite episode. I don't even really
yeah,
think about that episode. Like, I think that episode just to establish that we knew that she was a Jedi from a young age. But the reason
yeah,
I also don't like that episode as much is because you're gonna meet a Jedi. Like, sidebar, you've played Jedi Fallen Order, right? You know how Cal Kestis, he has psychometry. He can touch objects and read their histories. They start doing this thing where they have Jedi that are good at doing certain things. And so Cal Kestis was that. Ezra Bridger, when you meet him in Rebels, his whole thing is doing what Ahsoka did, being able to like commune with animals and creatures. That's like his thing. And he had to be, you know, an older teenager going into his 20s in order to do that. So, yeah, just brief sidebar, just saying, I also agree. It is not my favorite episode. Outside of that, the next couple episodes, those are the things I like to focus on. But yes,
yeah. But then we move on to more like I think the next one is about uh
that's Dooku and Qui Gon.
Dooku. Yeah. Oh, I also wrote down that everyone has stormtrooper aim in that first episode.
They do. They
Yeah.
can't hit a giant tiger. Oops.
Yeah. But anyways, so then after that is when we started seeing the Count Dooku and young Qui Gon, and the next couple episodes is of kind of the two of them, growing, uh, becoming older, and then we really get to see Count Dooku's path develop, from like trying to do good, even though he does the Vader chokehold in that episode, and I'm like, but that's Vader's thing, so why is it happening now? Like I
Oh,
know
it's,
that,
it's it's not necessarily
but
Vader's thing.
it's like his trademark move, so it's weird. Like it just feels weird that like they're having Dooku do it, and I don't know if he does it like in Clone Wars all the time,
He
but
does.
okay, well, I didn't like it, but fine, whatever. But I like how they, mentioned, they brought attention to the fact that he deleted the files from Cephadius about Camino, and like the ordering of the clones. So it was like, oh, that explains why no one knew about it. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for fixing the mistakes in episode, was it 2? Yeah.
Kind of. They
Three.
so that's one of those things that is actually just more of a holdover from Clone Wars. Clone Wars actually goes way in depth of the whole Sifo Dyas and the ordering
Oh,
of the
okay.
clones and
Got
stuff like
it.
that. So and there's this whole storyline about them trying to figure out who Sifo Dyas is, and then the whole thing of the reveal for Dooku and stuff like that, which some of that crosses over with the movie, but it goes way in depth in the Clone Wars. So this moment is kind of just kind of like a little cherry just to say, hey, look, this is the beginning of all that Sifo Dyas stuff starting to happen. So yeah.
Yeah.
But it's great. I still agree that it's a great moment. I'm glad they included it. Him going into the library and just deleting the information on Camino. I love it because yes, you're right. They didn't know where Camino was. They found it by accident, basically.
Yeah. And there's just like a whole bunch of these little tidbits that show you where we are in space and time of the movie timelines, I guess. And okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the fight between Dooku and Yaddle, which is the alien that looks just like Yoda.
Yoda. So I want to talk about that too. Before that, though, one thing I want to say is just that talking about how you were saying how it slots in neatly and explains things in a way that enhances it. That's another reason why I like this is that it earns its place in the Star Wars lore because Yaddle is in Episode 1. You can see Yaddle on the council. She's sitting on a chair, and people have known who Yaddle is for years. So like seeing Yaddle in this was a very much a surprise because I wasn't expecting to see Yaddle in this. But it also is interesting because Yaddle is notoriously not in Episode 2 and in Episode 3. And people always asked, what happened to Yaddle? Why isn't Yaddle in Episode 2 and 3? And you talk about where things are slotted. This is slotted in the beginning, or I guess in the middle / beginning of Phantom Menace and post Phantom Menace. So you get to see Dooku meeting with Qui-Gon and Qui-Gon talking about how he ran into a Sith Lord, which we know is Darth Maul. And then him having this moment with his young apprentice, which you can tell that he really has a lot of love for Qui-Gon. And then that next scene where he's staring at that tree and he's talking about how he's not saying he misses Qui-Gon, but you could tell that the death of Qui-Gon is really, really hurting him. And then it even explains why he was not at the funeral scene, because he wasn't at the funeral at the end of Episode 1. And so when Yaddle says, you can come to me to the funeral, he says, I don't think they'd want me there. They even explain why Dooku, who hadn't been cast yet, obviously, but why Dooku was not at the funeral of his apprentice at the end of Episode 1. So all these things just work to kind of slot together very nicely in the whole thing. And then, yes, let's go ahead and talk about like the moment when Yaddle reveals herself and decides to start and then has a fight with Dooku.
Yeah, I would say that it's one of my favorite Star Wars lightsaber fights, just in general. And like there's this one shot of her holding the door up, and like that was so good. My only problem was, I like, I don't like the way that they had her die, because when the door closed on her, I was like, oh.
It flattened. I was like, yes, that's her death.
Yeah, and I would have rather that happen, even though like the shot with her holding the door up, like put that somewhere else earlier, but like let that be how she dies, because the fact that she does that after the door closes on her, like when you think that she's dead, and then they bring her back like a fake, like a death. Like a fake death. But then if the door was closed, she should have just left to get back up.
Just fallen out the back. No, why'd you fall into it? Why didn't you just, even if you lifted it, why did you fall forward? Just fall backwards.
Right, because they thought that she
was dead.
Dead. So that was the perfect time for her to retreat and get back up, report what she found and discovered, but instead she opened the door and went back in, fainted, and then just got killed. So that didn't make sense to me. I wish they didn't do that. And the fact that Dooku would just, like, you know, whack her with a lightsaber and kill her that way is just way less awesome, because she didn't go down without a fight. She went down without a fight.
Yeah. And, like, I remember seeing that, and I just thought to myself, like, when I thought that she had died when the door closed, I was like, yo, no way, y'all just killed this girl like this. And I just got tired. I was like, oh, that is such a messed up death. I was so excited and sad, but I was still excited And then yes, and then like you, it felt very underwhelming to have her lift it and then fall back in. Like I was just like, you still had Dooku do the deed. Like if the whole point was to have him kill, like a friend, which he hadn't done up to that point, having him kill her through crushing her, is is a good way of showing that. Because also one, it shows that you know Yaddle was a force to be reckoned with herself. Like he had trouble to the point where he had to like get creative in order to beat her. I like that as an idea because we get the like the way Star Wars does its power scaling is basically based off of who gets to fight who and who you see get beat. So like when you see Dooku fight Obi-Wan and Anakin in episode 2, you get the sense that Dooku is super strong because he beats Obi-Wan and Anakin by himself and then fights Yoda. But when he fights Yoda, he runs away. So you get the feeling it's like, okay, Dooku, you're clearly stronger than these two, but you ain't stronger than Yoda. So I like the idea that it's like, hey, Yaddle is a problem. Yaddle is a Jedi master who is sitting on the council. She's hard for you to fight. I like the idea that you have to get creative to kill her, which I guess technically still holds true, but I liked it better when it seemed more definitive that that was her death. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, I almost kind of wish that he got a little help from Sidious too. Because then we could see Sidious do something, and I know he was giving Dooku a test, but
Yeah.
still, I feel
Prove your
like
loyalty.
exactly. But I feel like he could have, put Dooku in a position to help him, like so that there was no excuse for him to fail in killing Yaddle, right? So I kind of wish that like he did, maybe he like could do like just even a simple like a lightning thing or like a force push just to help him out a little bit and to achieve defeat of Yaddle, so that not only would show Yaddle's strength versus Dooku, because then it would show that Yaddle is stronger than Dooku, but with Sidious, like him just being like, oh, there, it will also show Sidious's power. So I almost wish that they didn't show Dooku's like rating that way.
Right. No, I feel you there. Okay, this is probably going to be a slightly longer episode. We're just going to agree to that right now. We have to talk about the Ahsoka stuff
Yes.
next. So the last thing I want to just talk about with Dooku is just I think it's pretty interesting how when the more we see of characters like Mace Windu in the Clone Wars and even in this, the more it's revealed that the Council was starting to lose its way. They were becoming pawns of the Senate, and their own and Mace Windu makes a comment about ego and how they're only driven by the Council, but you start to realize that their own exuberance, hubris, their own hubris is starting to get the better of them, which is why even Qui-Gon wasn't for them in episode 1. So I like that Qui-Gon and Dooku kind of had similar outlooks on the council, but I think if Qui-Gon had lived, they still would have taken very different paths. But I like that we start seeing more of that. But yeah, let's talk about Ahsoka. So Ahsoka also gets 3 episodes. We talked about the baby episode already. The last 2 episodes, the episode 5, which I really enjoy, it is more it is super short. It's like 9 minutes long. And it's more so kind of it almost feels like this could have been like a flashback within an episode, because it is merely to detail the training that will allow Ahsoka to survive Order 66. And because you haven't seen season 7, I'm not going to get into the specifics of how she survives, but I will say when you get to season 7 and can see the Siege of Mandalore, which is basically a movie, it's 4 episodes that are all like half an hour apiece, so it's like a 2-hour movie. But when you get there, it'd be really interesting for you to go back and look at this episode, because you're going to see, let's just say, some similarities in how Ahsoka is able to survive. And so that episode, for me, and I think for people that have seen season 7, is kind of like another cherry moment where it's the cherry on top. And if you've seen that, it's it means more because there's things that you're picking up on. But that being said, as someone who hasn't seen it, your perspective is still interesting to me about like how you received that episode.
I thought it was interesting. It didn't fit into the timeline I knew, but I also understood that I hadn't seen enough of Clone Wars to really fully appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just knowing that I kept that in the back of my head, but um, I feel like I really need to see what was going on in Clone Wars to fully appreciate what the episode
Yes.
was, because otherwise it was really just
Nothing.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this is the only episode that actually takes place during Clone Wars. Everything else we've talked about is pre Clone Wars. Even that Dooku episode with Yaddle, that is technically between episode 1 and 2, but it's pre Clone Wars animated series. So you can watch those episodes without any prior knowledge. It just will enhance certain moments, but it's actually more tied. Those episodes are more tied to the movies than they are to the show itself. And even the next Ahsoka episode takes place after the series is over. So that one is fine too. This is actually the only episode out of all the shorts that takes place and requires intimate knowledge of the actual Clone Wars series because even within this one episode, it jumps times. It jumps time not timelines, but just it happens over time because even the Clone Wars takes place over the course of a couple of years. I think it's like 2 or 3 years, and Ahsoka ages in the show, and so they show that passage of time here by showing her. If you notice, her head tails are shorter at the beginning, and then they're longer in the middle, and then the longest at the end because in the show she gets older, and that's how they denote her getting older, and her outfit changes too. So unfortunately, I do feel like this episode is one, and even when I saw it I was like, ah, oh, dang, I wish Charlotte had finished it because it is the only episode that is mainly there to reward the time investment for the Clone Wars. And that's why I wanted to ask you how you felt about it without that knowledge, because without that knowledge, it doesn't feel like it is as strong an episode, even though I do think it is still nice to just see how Anakin was choosing to train her, because it shows that he has kind of this tough love thing about her and is like, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure you have the best training so that you survive, because the way the Jedis do things, it's not good enough. And it also shows how Anakin is also different as a master too, which I like.
Yeah, that I noticed, and I thought that was cool, and I really liked the relationship that they showed the two of them have in that episode. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, you're right. I need to go and watch Clone Wars to really fully appreciate it.
And yeah, once you finish, just come back to this episode. But the last episode, where this one actually does take place after the end of Clone Wars. Even without knowing how Clone Wars ends, we know what happens because, like I said, you've played Jedi Fallen Order, you've seen Obi-Wan. We all know that Jedi went into hiding. We all know that they were hiding all over the place, whatever, whatever. So you can assume that, however Ahsoka survived, she had been hiding during the time between the end of Revenge of the Sith and the beginning of A New Hope, or even past A New Hope, because we don't see her in those movies. So that being said, this is another episode that is easy to digest as far as just jumping into it. Um, this is probably not my favorite episode, but I like this episode a lot because of the music and the art design. The fire, the scene of her standing in the with the burning village around them while she faces down an inquisitor is just it's such a cool shot, and it's so cool, and I thought the inquisitor looked cool. I was just let down by that fight, man. I get it. She didn't have a lightsaber. It shows how strong she is because she was able to disarm and beat an inquisitor with his own lightsaber, and that's dope. But I was like, man, I just kind of wanted a little bit more. But that episode also exists to kind of tie into like the Ahsoka novels a little bit, where let's just say at the end of season 7, let's just say for whatever reason Ahsoka doesn't have her lightsabers anymore, and so and you've seen her in Mandalorian, she has white lightsabers. So this kind of starts to tell how she got those white lightsabers, and it started with her taking this Inquisitor's sword, and I kind of wish they showed more to show what she actually does to turn that Inquisitor sword into what she will then have as two white lightsabers. But it's fine enough that they implied that that's where this will lead. So once again, I think this episode is enhanced by knowledge that happens outside of the episode itself. But within the episode itself, I thought it was fine. I thought it was decent, and I still enjoy seeing Ahsoka. But I feel like I just wanted a little bit more.
What I liked about that episode, that last episode, was that it was very well established because it starts with Padme's funeral.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that's how it starts. Yes,
Yeah,
that's so true.
and it's like shot for shot out of the movie,
Yes.
and so like it kind of brought me home to it. And again, like I said before, I love seeing like different perspectives of stuff that we've already seen, and it was cool that they like inserted Ahsoka there to Padme's
Yeah.
funeral because they were friends, and you know they did have this bond relationship in the Clone Wars. And so I thought it was cool that they like kind of gave her this relationship with Senator
Bail Organa.
yeah, Organa. And um, it was nice to see Organa, first of all.
It's always nice seeing
It's all,
Organa.
yeah, it's always nice to see him. But I guess like I just enjoyed being able to be placed back into the movies again.
Yes.
And
I
then,
agree with that.
and the way that it ends with him basically asking her if she's ready to
Right.
like fight again, like that got me excited because then I'm like, oh, then it reminded me that they're making an Ahsoka series. And so now I'm really excited to see that, and I'm hoping to, you know, see maybe if it's a little bit more in that era, in that
It's
timeline where
not.
she's trying to fight. Dang.
It's not.
It
Ahsoka
would be
series
too
is
hard to
gonna take.
have Organa again
Yeah.
because he's getting older.
Yeah, the Ahsoka series is going to take place after the Mandalorian season 2.
Oh, yeah,
because
that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Because they have
unfortunate
Rosario Dawson.
Dawson. Yeah,
Yeah.
but maybe there might be flashbacks to that time. But you did bring up something that I also let me say you reminded me. I was remembering my disappointment, but I forgot all the things I liked. And yeah, you reminded me that was one thing that I really liked was that it shows how she gets back into the fight, because she does go into hiding, and just there's a lot that you got to see. But let's just say that in Rebels, Ahsoka has a presence, and it explains why Ahsoka would be there in Rebels. So that's another reason. Like this thing also is a direct line to where Ahsoka will be once Rebels begins. So and like yes, I like also how Ahsoka was being told by Organa when Organa was being held up by the troopers, and he's basically telling them, "Hey, if you need time, that's fine." Blah blah blah. But when you need me, just let me know and I'll be there. And I was like, "Yo, Organa, you're so cool, man."
Best. He's like one of the best non-Jedi characters in the world.
Yes,
In the world
absolutely.
of Star Wars. But yeah, I mean, overall, like these episodes were really enjoyable. They're essentially connecting tissue that, like we didn't know we needed, and are glad to have. And yeah, I mean, I wish there was more, and I think the reason
I
why
do
we want
too.
more is it's not just because it's connecting tissue, but it's like it's like in itself, it's just more of the stuff that we're already familiar with. And, you know, we can just keep watching all of this stuff. Like, the
Yeah.
fact that it's part of the main stories that were established already is, you know, because, like, stuff like Andor is fine and stuff because there's nothing on the line. Because they can do whatever they want and it won't matter. But as soon as you start connecting stuff and bringing back things that we fans already know about and are familiar with, that's when it gets really exciting because it's very hard to do with stuff that already exists.
Yeah.
And we've seen failures of that.
Yes, exactly.
3 really big failures.
Which will remain nameless on this show. But yeah, and it's nice to see Star Wars with like such an attention to detail, such love, and the ability to juggle legacy characters, but also tell a compelling story that doesn't seem like a cynical attempt at making money, but seems like an earnest attempt to honestly tell a story that is concise, cohesive, and that people will enjoy. So I am 100% on board. I would love to see more Star Wars animations. I think that Star Wars animation is in a league of its own. I think that Star Wars has found a home in animation, and for whatever reason, their animated content is more consistent than their live action content. And at this point, we have over like 8 to 9 years of content that proves that to be true. So I want to see more animated Star Wars. I want to play around in this world. Maybe we don't have to still stay in like this Republic era. I would love to see the pre-Republic era, or the era of the High Republic. I would love to see that. Maybe we could see more of the time in between Episode 6 and Episode 7. But I'm kind of interested in just seeing more animated Star Wars.
Yeah, we need like the Rings of Power version of Star Wars.
That's actually really good. Yes. But we have run up on a lot of time. This is like one of our longest episodes recordings that we've done, but
I
it
think
also
it's
makes
the
sense.
longest.
Yes, but is there anything
Yeah.
else you want to really quickly get off your chest about this, like Tales of the Jedi, before we get out of here?
No, I'm good.
All right. So that's what we thought of Tales of the Jedi. If you can't tell, we're passionate about Star Wars. We love Star Wars. We could talk about it all day. But do you love Star Wars out there? What did you guys think about Tales of the Jedi? Do you want to see more? Was it not long enough for you? Did you think that it was just perfect? Do you want to see more of like stories told in this kind of way? More? Do you want to see more of these characters? What have you thought about it? Comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next